Ladies and gentlemen, and this is the Imperium's Worst Jobs Part 2 Warhammer 40k Lore History by Channel Lutin09. I did the first video, Imperium's 10 Worst Jobs, and holy shit, that was a really good video. Like, this is the type of shit that is really fun, right? In a lore, especially, of any kind. Especially of Warhammer 40k. So all the, first of all, the people who has to walk around outside of the certain worlds, which is danger itself, and there was a part of just someone just going out to the ship, all those fucking things were ridiculous. I mean, look, the best jobs are okay, understandable. It would be something like Space Marine and shit like that, sure. But worst job is where the fun is, right? Because obviously all the thing we hear about Warhammer 40k, that's just the surface of it, right? There are many things involved in the lore, which is not the famous one, right? So you hear of all these different people with jobs, different people who has to do certain things, which is kind of fucked up. It's really depressing in a way, but it's also fun to learn about. So we'll see what the part 2, it's an hour-long video. So first part I already thought like, holy shit, this many worst job, but clearly this is Warhammer 40k. It's a way too big of a lore, so there's going to be many of them. And apparently just seeing the timestamps, it's, look at how many of that. Holy shit, there are many of them. So obviously I won't be able to do this in one part because it's an hour-long video. But yeah, let's do it. Remember people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like, subscribe, so I know which type of videos to react to more. I love Warhammer 40k, so I want to do more and more Warhammer 40k, but I guess it depends on how much view I get per video. But yeah, definitely like and subscribe, that way I'll know it. Yeah, let's watch it. Damn, this is heavy. Serious music, piano and everything. This artwork.
Within the bowels of the Imperium, the souls that lie down in the filth, decay and horror, it's difficult for those poor wretches to consider themselves within the vision and the light of the Emperor of Man. For as gloriously as the Imperium presents itself, in the depths of the human spirit and the lowest levels of its vast hive cities, languish those in eternal despair, never to know anything other than a life of hardship, toil and suffering, the rotten core of humanity's galactic empire. This is why it remains its own worst enemy, for here is where you'll find the most acute fracture points for discontent and those with nothing left to live for other than turn their souls over to the darkest whisperings that bleed into our reality from the realm behind our own. It's worth remembering also that for those who live in the Imperium, the phrase jobs is relatively inaccurate. Most people's assignments are not what we might consider jobs, they are more worker assignments. This though is of course dependent on the world you find yourself upon.
It's a duty.
For there are those within realms such as Ultramar where degrees of independence are far more commonplace. Another aspect I've spoken to before is that within the Imperium there is no standardized currency system in the sense of a currency used by all, including ordinary citizenry anyway. And to do so would be challenging if not near impossible given the distance, scale and instability of the Imperium as a whole. While many hive worlds, for example, use ambiguously titled credits, individual systems may have their own localized currencies, and other feudal planets can even operate on a more basic barter system, supplemented with very rudimentary coinage. There exists a unit of value known as the throne gelt, which is as close to being universal payment as exists. This is often exclusively used by traders, rogue traders, inquisitors, and other imperial officials who travel between systems and sectors of the galaxy. However you end up being compensated for your services though, it's most unlikely.
I'm pretty sure I said this in the worst job video, but this whole pirate thing, right? I mean, you could create Han Solo type, just pirating adventure type of shit, and that would be just one person of Warhammer 40k. But you could tap into that, make some kind of a game or something out of that, right? Really fun RPG style game, but also bleeding in other stories that is happening out there, but it's not part of your game. and then you expand from that. Holy shit, how good that would that be? I don't know. Closest thing I think of is Bethesda. Obviously, people hate Bethesda now, but I can't think of any other developer who could do it justice at this level, at least, right? I get it, CD Projekt Red and everything, but for the RPG and openness element of it, I can only think of Elder Scrolls and shit like that, right? Fallout, Elder Scrolls. So Warhammer 40k game would be so awesome. I don't know.
That you as an ordinary pleb citizen would have a literal choice in the direction of your life. Upon most worlds there is little if any education beyond the basic laws to follow and how to operate machinery. Most people live with passed down knowledge on how to survive as a human in the most basic sense. And those humans in the eyes of the Imperium are merely flesh matter. They are unimportant dust motes in the grand scale of the Imperium, and you are as much a raw material asset to the Imperium as much as it
Holy shit, look at that person in the distance with this. These artworks are ridiculous.
is ore, ammunition, or other consumables. So now let us continue to explore the true horror of 40k, for it is not the glory and service of the Astartes, it is the mind-numbing drudgery, the lack of hope, the acceptance of banality that is the true horror for humans in the nightmare that is the 41st
Hey, yeah, we get it, man.
Many
It's depressing.
welcome
Come
death
on.
when it comes, and others mutter about the madness of their own. The Imperium directs its rage and fury outwardly to the Xenos and the Heretic, but it is much to blame for the extreme levels of suffering inflicted upon the many trillions of ordinary citizens across the entire galaxy, as much as those who would seek to see it permanently obliterated. If you yourself were here, how would you serve? What role would you see yourself in? If you have a worse 40k job in mind, as always, throw it in the comments, and maybe I'll include it in a part 3 of this series.
There's a part 3?
The horror.
Obviously it's gonna come, it's just been 10 months.
In the darkness of the 41st millennium, humanity has fallen into a true
Tech-thralls.
abyss of moral and ethical darkness. Human lives are bizarrely fought for ferociously in terms of the preservation of the collective empire that is the Emperor's Imperium, yet individual lives are treated as little more than a material commodity. Conversion to servitors, archo-flagellants and the like, thinking, feeling human beings stripped of both their humanity and their minds turned to mush with regularity. The Imperium also uses techniques like mind wiping of problematic or troublemaking individuals, those they consider compromised or even just a risk factor. Mind wipes are usually
sure that's
achieved
not
through a
abused.
flood of neurochemicals being injected to the base of the cranium, steadily erasing personal memories and identity like a cold, clouded fog drifting through the mind of an individual. This is not isolated in use for conversion of humans to servitor slaves, it also can be used for Astartes, especially
Wait a
those
minute, where have I heard this? I'm pretty sure I've seen this Tech-thralls, somebody who just gets lobotomized and is just like a... Wasn't that a Lutin video too? I don't know, man.
the Grey Knights, where mind wiping is standard practice to protect them from themselves while facing demons that might twist and distort their memory of loved ones to become weapons against an individual. Mind wipes, though, are not always the default practice for control of humans in low status service. Many in fact exist in a state of servitude, but are only subjected to damaging processes like mind wipes should it be strictly necessary. And this can sometimes occur for those who live in service to the Mechanicus. They are known as the Tech-thralls. Thralls, however, are not like servitors. They are still classified as human, at least in terms of their minds anyway.
Oh, okay. I am thinking about the last Imperial's Worst job, but servitors is the one I'm thinking of. But it's similar to this, apparently.
They retain thoughts of their hopes and dreams, they hold on to fears and express desires. Some Tech-thralls burn brighter than others in their feelings, but most are depressingly broken individuals, worn down to shells of human being through the endless drudgery of their existence. Brutality, tough shifts of menial labour, most would gladly welcome death when it finally comes. They may be
Holy
known
shit.
as ad secularis, the Tech-thralls. They exist primarily as the servant class of the Adeptus Mechanicus, cybernetically adapted humans who retain some semblance of humanity. They sit just above servitors in ranking, but far below all others. They are adapted by the Mechanicus to ensure they remain both obedient and efficient, and while their humanity is left more intact than that of a servitor's conversion, where servitors are effectively brain dead and merely motorized flesh matter, it's entirely debatable as to whether this is in fact a more humane fate than that of the adaptation and subsequent assignments which mean becoming a Tech-thrall, where your life is all but consigned to oblivion, yet left within your shell are the last threads of your humanity, screaming from the inside out. In the
Seriously, man, this Tech-thrall servitors puts into perspective like how in 41st millennium in Imperium, the word humanity, humane things doesn't matter that much, right? When someone can be turned into something like this in today's world, in this planet, in any country, in any government, doesn't matter what your law is, doesn't matter what your past is. The question of is that humane kind of comes similarly everywhere. Like, that's a human being. Should you, is this even, humane way to anything, right? If something is way too dark, is this humane? No, it's not. That's the question everywhere pops up. That's just your default setting as human, right? We question that, is this humane? Is this, this kind of punishment, is that humane? This and that always comes up, right? But in the 41st millennium, this kind of paints the picture, like servitors, tech-thralls, like, is this humane is not a question anymore, right? And that's kind of frightening, because if you remove that layer of how humans think, if you remove that layer, the world is way too bleak. Every time somebody says like, this is a dark, grim world, but you really don't process that until you see something shit like this.
In the eyes of the Mechanicus, however, they are simply a necessary adaptation. Any subject is suitable, although often they select the most disposable individuals, troublemakers, deserters, prisoners, condemned criminals and the like, although it should be noted that those selected for the role of a tech-thrall may equally hail from just ordinary citizenry when needs must. Humans selected for conversion will be augmented with basic cybernetics. Commonly, this involves limb removal and degrees of exoskeletal reinforcement to enable workers to then carry heavy loads and operate large-scale machinery and other industrial tasks.
Damn.
They also may be subjected to relatively low-tech optical and other interface adaptation. Lastly, there may be some cranial surgery where some mind erasure can take place for the most troublesome or offensive individuals. The thrall class of human will obey any order given by the Mechanicus or other imperial authority. They are in effect drones, but while much of their humanity is stripped away, they do still attempt to retain something or some semblance of a society within themselves, or as much as it can be classified as such. It may seem that to a degree they are not far away from the levels of subjugation inflicted upon ordinary citizens of the Imperium, but thralls exist in fact barely above servitors. They just have the unfortunate terminal torture of being very aware of it. Thralls were originally created by the Mechanicum out of necessity, and this development occurred during the period of imperial expansion known as the...
Tech-thralls are just servitors, but with A15 bionic chip, basically.
Great Crusade culminating in the Horus Heresy. It's unclear as to why, but for whatever reason, there became an intense need for something slightly above servitors, which used formerly human biological matter, and after effectively lobotomization of a subject, servitors became a biocybernetic component system. Thralls are more akin to straight cyborgs. Their consciousness and memory are generally not extinguished before being processed into their new form. The conversion process to tech-thralls is a fate for many of a Forge World's population should they prove substandard in their duties or commit some other transgression against members of the Mechanicus. And the Mechanicus...
The memory and things are not wiped before the conversion. Isn't that torturous? Holy shit.
Hate wasting things. Why simply dispose of a troublesome human when they can serve the almighty cog until death? Upon Mechanicus Forge Worlds, tech-thralls form a massive part of the expendable labour force, and this is standard across the Imperium. There will of course still be large components of standard humans, but thralls are commonplace. If thralls are to be used for military purposes by the Mechanicus, this is when they are designated as the ad secularis, and this is of course a role that they are well suited for. After being outfitted with basic weapons systems and bodily protection, they will march to war as basically humanoid fodder. They are an unrelenting force of mentally alive soldiers, yet with no will of their own, puppeted by Mechanicus techs. It's not entirely dissimilar to some other machinery used by the tech priests, who are seemingly more skilled with wetware than they are the artificial systems of intelligence, perhaps for obvious reasons, being that the latter is strictly outlawed. Tech-thralls will advance into the most ferocious enemy onslaughts without apparent fear, and are formed into so-called covenants. Their primary weapon is, like so much in the Imperium, weight of numbers, sending wave after wave of their own men at the enemy and making any foe seem, quite simply, a trifle. Thralls are, unfortunately for them, just as susceptible to injury as any guardsmen, except they have the additional misery of being very dulled externally in response to their injuries. Internally, it's likely a sliding scale of just how much or how little individual thralls actually feel. For some, it's perhaps akin to being a servant of the plague god, whereby any injury barely registers in terms of pain. For other thralls who perhaps still burn bright in the mind but lack will of their own, it's going to be comparable to awakening during surgery but remaining trapped in an unresponsive body. All of this, of course, irrelevant to the machine god. Flesh will be torn away, but knowledge must remain eternal. All of this, though, is not actually why Tech-thralls feature in this second offering of worst jobs. The reasoning for their inclusion is that no matter their service record, longevity, or otherwise general usefulness, the ultimate fate of any Tech-thrall or ad secularis is to be recycled into servitor components. Their augmatic implants will be harvested for continued use. There is no hope for them other than remaining a defective, inferior being in the eyes of the Mechanicus and general humanity. They exist as the condemned and the despised. Death is a release when it comes, until they, of course, enter the realm beyond. Now, also, allow me to immediately contradict myself, for there is one other notable class of ad secularis, but it is a very minimal class, generally speaking. These are the Titan ad secularis. Can you guess to which role they're assigned? It's Titans. Different legios can refer to the Tech-thralls under them with other terms than ad secularis, and will even sometimes dress them with clean tabards and other simple cloth to give them a level of dignity, not for themselves obviously, but to not offend the sanctity of the machine and its spirit. This is perhaps one of the exceptions to the rule, as thralls who serve within a Titan may sometimes be gifted minimal benefits by its tech priests, augmatics and so forth. Mostly these so-called gifts can be interpreted more for the Mechanicus wanting to increase efficiency aboard a Titan than give anything to a thrall, but still for the thrall it's equally beneficial. It is perhaps the single ray of hope for a thrall to serve aboard a god machine of the Mechanicus, and in doing so achieve a sliver of dignity and appreciation for their service. For the remaining unwashed masses, it's a lifetime of otherwise condemned misery.
Holy shit, I don't know why. I mean, comment down if you think it differently, but I feel like servitors, Tech-thralls are psychologically, it's the lowest form. It's the most depressing thing there can be. Just the way how lowers the human value, right? I mean, this is the depressing shit there can be. Any other case, like something can be really horrible than Tech-thralls and servitors, sure, but that could be situational, right? That could be what is required, what is a job, what is what. But as a person, this is lower than low. I mean, this is just, it's like they become, servitors become this kind of, mindless zombies. Tech-thralls, I guess, retain their thoughts and shit. But still, in the end, they get recycled. This is just fucked up.
Now, the selection of Chapter Serf as a worst job will undoubtedly be a contentious selection, because it honestly is somewhat subjective. In many ways, serving as a serf for the Astartes can only be seen as the highest honour, and any service to the Imperium and the Emperor is a glorious duty and one to be held with immense pride, not to mention the fact that serfs are generally well treated, in relatively safe environments, also educated above ordinary humans who live miserable trudging lives in hive cities around pollution, disease, crime, and most often abominable conditions. Serfs, on the other hand, will live within chapter monasteries of Astartes, surrounded by glorious sculptures, artisan works, and of course on a daily basis serve firsthand those who are the descendants of the Emperor himself, in a manner of speaking, give me a break. So, why would serfs be included? Like I said, it depends on your point of view, so hear me out. And it's also a very literal sliding scale. There are many examples of ordinary humans serving the Astartes who would rise to hold ranks such as Housecarl or Equerry. At the other end of the scale, there are those who will live lives which again, I feel can be torturous. Serfs are very often failed space marines, who for one reason or another did not meet the grade when it came to the progression of becoming a space marine. Now they have to live lives away from their homeworld, their family, and they may live in shame and humiliation every single day.
Damn.
The fact that their son never became an Astartes, or perhaps they live in mistaken delusion, believing still a slim chance that they were in fact converted to an Astartes. A serf's life, though, can be wide-ranging. Some will be abused on a near-daily basis by Astartes masters who look down upon them and remind them of their own humanity, something they hate. They will throw continual demeaning shame toward them at every opportunity. Some Astartes chapters, and especially those who would fall into darkness during the heresy, like the Death Guard, would punish serfs with brutal physical penalties for minor errors in service. Unsurprisingly, the Iron Warriors as well. But for many serfs, the daily existence of being permanently reminded of their failures, yet simultaneously knowing they must continue to serve the Emperor, is something of a bizarre torture. Yes, they are rewarded by the mere ability and glory of serving the Astartes, but the continual personal humiliation of knowing they just lost out, or they didn't make the cut, never ceases to burn inside. Some serfs, though, will make actual close friendships and bonds with the more reasonable and forward-thinking Astartes chapters. For those, though, that lean toward the edge of acceptable practices, existence as a serf can be a daily trial for survival, punctuated with broken limbs and other intolerable punishments. Like so many things, it's subjective and relative. All human.
So this trope, closest thing I think of is those stories, or at least movies you see of, like someone is royalty but not really royalty because he's a bastard or something, not from the same blood, and get treated that way. In the whatever royal family or whatever, right? So they're not the bottom of the bottom, but they fail to make the cut. So they live in this life surrounded by Astartes and everybody, but they are treated that way and treated somewhat badly, depending where you are, and constantly reminded that you didn't make the cut. So, like I said, that I love Warhammer because they take different stories from different places, right? Real life places, and they include in this Warhammer 40k, which is really fucking awesome. This is similar to that.
Humans position their outlook from their own place relative to others, and while it's easy to say, well, look at that poor sap cleaning the drains from a toxic spill in a hive basement, sure, a serf has it better comparably. For a serf, though, such thoughts will be a cold comfort, while their Astartes master is belittling them for the thousandth time, being made to endure some long-lasting physical trial to prove their continued worth, and any other daily misery that they may have to endure. For serfs who find themselves in that position, suddenly the life of an agricultural worker might seem quite appealing. Is a chapter serf a worse job? Possibly. But it's really the luck of the draw. For the lucky ones, it's a life of honoured service and a glowing pride deep inside that they held an opportunity to continue to serve the Emperor despite their own shortcomings. For other serfs, though, it's a lifetime of personal reminders that when it came to it, they fell short, and this is then permanently reinforced daily with physical punishments atop. In many ways, their brutal trial to become an Astartes never truly ended, nor will it ever until they succumb to the conditions of living on a freezing battle barge or an Astartes master who cast them aside without remembering to control their strength on one particular day. For all who serve the Emperor, only in death does duty end.
I'm imagining some kind of an edition where these torturous serfs that are treated badly, obviously they went through the whole procedure to become Astartes, was they didn't make the cut, but they still went through that. There would be a better, tougher than your average human because of that. I'm imagining that there's some kind of a faction could rise from that, like this serfs had it enough with the bad treatment or whatever, it kind of rises up or something. Even though that doesn't happen in Imperium because they'll be swashed down fucking fast, I'm just imagining they could add an element like that. GW could do that. They could just add that element and create some kind of a guerrilla type of thing where serf rises up or whatever. I don't know. Imperial mining planet crew, okay.
So next up, another straightforward one. It's likely fair to say that mining throughout human history has been one of the most challenging and dangerous professions, and unsurprisingly in the 41st millennium, for humankind little has changed. Of course, for some planets in the Imperium, this means actual cities being built underground, such are the scale of the operations. This means that for many a lifetime will pass by without ever having seen the light of the surface again. The concept of day and night will no longer exist as they live in a permanent state of darkness. Safety measures will be variable at best, and again, like most things, it likely depends on the kind of overseeing governorship you're working under. For planets within realms like Ultramar, your chances of having basic equipment are going to be better than that of a backwater planet with a tyrannical governor who cares about quotas and coins. Imperial miners are condemned to a life underground, as any exposure to the outside world of the light will be detrimental to their vision. Their lives underground, even with respirators, will ensure they spend their earliest days breathing in air saturated with fine particles, leading to many respiratory illnesses and other complications in life, meaning high mortality rates in the populace. Of course, that's even before you come to the possible dangers of cave-ins, other collapses, machinery malfunctions, and other explosions of poorly stored materials. It's a very dangerous life, but like most human societies, the positives will be in the people. The sense of collective effort, worth, and community are what enable Imperial mining communities to function. Plus, of course, the ever-present overseers who exist at nearly all levels of industrial Imperial society. Slack in your work, negligent, you'll be facing punishment physically or prevented from working potentially permanently, which for many Imperials is effectively a death sentence by any other name. Plus, of course, there's always the enjoyable risk of tunneling into a cavern and disturbing a nest of ambuls. Ambuls, those heavily armoured insectoid creatures that have sharpened claws for digging through straight rock itself, plus of course enabling them to effortlessly impale and bisect any prey they track and come across.
Damn.
Ambuls are powerful monstrosities who have reached the peak of evolution through survival in the harshest of environments. Plus, for the workers of mining planets, they also have a taste that can't be beat. Delicious ambul.
What the fuck
The
was
extremely rare...
that? Okay, seriously, mining I can see. I mean, mining can be really fucked up in 41st millennia since the scale would be so grand. You don't even see the sun for your whole life. There could be a situation like that. I mean, I can see how that could be fucked up. Especially somebody who's like this kind of a claustrophobia type of thing. Obviously, nobody would give a shit about your psychological issues in 41st millennia. So it would be really torturous for people like that. Because you can't really choose at that point, right? You're there, you're there. You can't just slack off like he said. There'll be punishment and shit. So I can see it.
Class of Titan, known as Psi Titans, are a specialized and feared class of Titan used within the Imperium's Collegia Titanica, known as the Ordo Sinister. Their weapons are known as Sinistrum, a term given to designate weapons which will artificially amplify human psychic power, but potentially risk consuming the psyche themselves in the process. The Emperor had used such things during the Unification Wars with enslaved Psyker covens, and of course now does so on a daily basis for himself. The key to a Psi Titan is its so-called Siracrux Anima, and this is the piece of technology that enables one of the worst jobs for a Psyker to be assigned to. Although it's not far off serving as a battery for the Emperor, but at least in doing that there is some spiritual glory to be held, or at least those who serve the Emperor console themselves by telling this half-truth. Unlike a standard Titan, Psi Titans contain Psykers surgically locked into the machine itself. These Psykers are believed to have been placed within these Titans either as punishment for crimes against the Imperium or at their own behest to allow them to become part of something more and help alleviate their own personal torments. Either way, they exist as psychic slaves to the will of the commander, who will use their powers and spirit focused through the Siracrux Anima. The command princeps of a Psi Titan is known as the Preceptor Indendent, and they will sit within the anti-Psi shielded headpiece of the Titan. It's unclear if this shielding was originally placed to protect ordinary princeps from piloting the Titan. If it were, it appears to have not been enough to withstand the psychic screaming of its implanted human batteries, and so within a Psi Titan, its commander is also a null or blank. And this is another reason as to why the Psi Titans are astonishingly rare. Their pilots are required to be both a blank and simultaneously capable of commanding a Titan. Across the entire galaxy of the Imperium, candidates that meet this criteria are going to likely only range in the numbers of double digits. Regardless though, the role for the damned Psykers surgically bound to the machine will live out truly horrifying ends. And it's why Psi Titans are some of the most feared machines of war, because they literally are tearing the Psyker's soul and spirit apart then focusing this into psychic beams to form its weaponry. A Psi Titan can project waves of abject fear, psychokinesis, biomantic leeching of life, and even temporal distortion, coming back to that time travel thing being confirmed in 40k. Then on top of this, it still has its so-called Sinistra Manus Tenebra.
Seriously, man, holy shit, like Titan, fucking scary. Psychic Titans, Psi Titans. What the fuck? I didn't see this coming. I never knew there was a thing, but there you go. Psychic Titans. I can see how this could be really fucked up for the people involved, but seriously, just seeing that on the battlefield, psychic Titans. Titans already, psychologically, fucked up for the enemies, because seeing a Titan alone should, that's really fucked up. But now seeing Psi Titans, right? Their ability is psychic, and it's a fucking Titan. I don't know. This is like really fucked up. I'm pretty sure they're rare, but imagine that, like seeing Titan in a warfield, seeing Titans like, oh holy shit, this is war. Then seeing a Psi Titan, like what the fuck, man? What's happening? This is horrible.
Bray, its Psi Cannon. This device allows it to focus the psychic antipathy of the psychers within to create a warp breach similar to a vortex weapon. Meanwhile, its psychers are burned and consumed from the inside out, not entirely dissimilarly to how, as I said, they're consumed by the Emperor. The principle is seemingly very similar, and although the specifics of the technology are far beyond human comprehension, it seems logical that the apparatus of the Golden Throne Room and the focused distillation of psychic power from individual psychers into the form of a weapon must share some similarities. Psi Titans and their weaponry can engage and fight for as long as those on board can power them. So unlike conventional weaponry, Psi cannons can be fired repeatedly on and on until those on board are consumed and turned to literal ash. The psychic strength of the bound psyker on board of the Psi Titan and the strength of their soul are its only limitations.
Damn, that's just horrible. Damn. You know what, I will stop now, it's the 30-minute mark, but holy shit. I mean, look, the Psi Titan thing is horrible. I don't know about the miner thing. Miners, I mean, obviously, even in the, on Earth, mining is kind of fucked up. But yeah, I can see how it could be really horrible. But yeah, the first list I saw, the 10, obviously I'm not all the way to 10, but first list I saw, the original one was really horrible, some of them. But in this one, yeah, I mean, serfs can be fucked up, but I don't feel like they're close to, they're supposed to be a status, but they failed. I mean, how horrible that can be. Some instances, sure, but not the whole serf spectrum, right? The Tech-thralls, I mean, that's horrible. Like I said, that's just fucking all around horrible. That just, seeing that exist itself tells you like how very little human life is considered in the end, right? I mean, how low Imperium can go to use human in some way without giving a shit about it. Word humane doesn't exist in a way. I mean, that's just fucked up. But yeah. Alright, well, if you like my reaction, subscribe. Yeah, I'll make the second part, I guess, tomorrow. But yeah, I'll see you next time.